There is not a story any bigger than the excitement, the enthusiasm that Vice President Kamala Harris has been able to garner from Democrats and even independents in just the last couple of days since it was announced that Joe Biden would not seek the nominee to become the president of the United States. We are going to talk about how Kamala Harris is becoming a pop culture icon on social media and what her message is that is having such a impact on voters young and old. But before we bring on those guests, I am delighted to be joined again by our Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She is the Congresswoman for the 30th Congressional District of the state of Texas. She joined the show a couple of weeks ago, and I was excited to have her back because she is quickly emerging as a key surrogate for Kamala Harris. When you are running for office, you can obviously only be in one place at one time. And given the short time period that Kamala Harris has to make her case to the American people, some suspect she will be camped out in the battleground states. Well, they're voters outside of the battleground states. So that means the campaign has to be strategic in selecting those surrogates who can go and deliver the message to the American people, not just about the presidential candidate, but about the importance of voting for those ballots, down ballot races as well. And Jasmine Crockett will be out on the campaign trail doing just that. Welcome back, Congresswoman Crockett. Always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Quickly, I know from some inside reports, you are going to be on the campaign trail, not just talking about the presidential election, but talking about the congressional races, the opportunity to flip the House, to have more seats, more Democratic seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. What are you hearing about Kamala Harris? What are you hearing about the chances of taking the House back?
Yeah, so I'm just now getting out of DC. We just finished votes, and I'm actually in New Orleans at this moment. I caught a flight as soon as I got out, and so we know that the Urban League is going to be here. It's going to be a great opportunity for me to actually talk to everyday people. It's probably my first real opportunity to actually talk to people and see how they are receiving the vice president. You know, if I'm looking from within my bubble in DC, it's been fantastic. But I am someone that always keeps my eye on the prize, and the prize is the people. And so I do want to get out into the streets. I do want to hear what they're saying. Obviously, I've had an opportunity to participate in the historic Win with Black Women call on Sunday. And so I was able to feel that energy, as well as I tuned in on YouTube and I watched the Win with Black Men that Roland Martin was able to do. And so it seems like the energy is there, but I want to have an actual conversation and discourse and find out what are real people saying. I don't want to hear about the trolls, the bots. I want to talk to real people. And so I think I'll have my first opportunity to do that. But I do think that based upon how my colleagues are acting on the Hill, they feel the enthusiasm and they are a little nervous as well.
Well, nervous. A lot of people are nervous. We're hearing a lot of people say, as excited as they are about Kamala Harris, they still aren't convinced that this country is ready to elect a woman, elect an African-American woman, a Southeast Asian woman. And we already have seen the attacks coming from the right, coming from Donald Trump and the GOP, some calling her a DEI candidate. But a couple of things seem to be happening. I read a story yesterday where a GOP leader has said, look, guys, stop it. Cut it out. Stop attacking her on identity. Let's attack her on her record. Let's make this race about the policy differences in these two candidates. And just as he's saying that, we're looking at commentators on Fox talk about her being at a colored sorority event and still seeing folks, cast aspersions on her, use this term that she's somehow a DEI candidate. So the voice of reason from the Republican Party doesn't seem to be winning out. How nasty do you think it's going to get as it relates to these attacks that we're already seeing on her race and her gender?
Oh, that's absolutely going to continue. But, my question isn't, are we ready to elect Kamala? I mean, the question is, are you seriously saying that y'all are ready to elect a dictator, a demagogue, and a disgraced felon. Like, that should be what people are saying. Is like, is our country ready to do that? The idea that you're electing someone who has consistently proven herself to be able to do what is unthinkable, right? She became the first Black woman to be elected prosecutor in the Bay. She became the first Black woman and only Black woman to be elected Attorney General in the state of California. She became only the second Black woman to be elected to the U.S. Senate. And she is the only Black woman to ever, Black woman, Asian woman, to be elected as the Vice President of the United States. And so it was interesting because as I now returned to New Orleans, the last time I was here was for Essence. And I recall the Vice President explaining to them then, when she was on the stage, that she eats no for breakfast. So listen.
Yeah, I remember her saying that.
Yes, exactly. She is ready. And you know what? All we need people to do is do like they did before in 2008, which I keep telling people that the word of the week is hopeful. That is the word that I continuously have heard. And the last time that I've heard about hope was actually back in 2008 with then Junior Senator Barack Obama. And he obviously ultimately ascended to become the president of the United States.
And everything you said is absolutely categorically correct. And there really shouldn't be a choice between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. There really shouldn't have been a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. When you look at the 34 felony convictions, you look at the $450 million civil verdict in that fraud case, you look at the $85 million civil verdict in that sexual assault and defamation case involving E. Jean Carroll. I mean, the list just goes on and on when you compare the record to Donald Trump. Yes, I mean, the list is long. But let's be clear, Congresswoman, there are millions and millions of voters who apparently are prepared to vote for Donald Trump despite all of that. The polls have been really close between Trump and Biden. And at one point, Trump was leading in the polls, and even the current polls, according to some pollsters, are still tight between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. So there is a large swath of our country that doesn't see this race the way you and I and so many of my listeners and viewers see it. How are we going to reach those voters?
Yeah, I think that we just obviously got to keep working. So, I know right now we are definitely in the honeymoon phase where everyone is so excited. We're hitting historic numbers for fundraising. We're hitting historic numbers for voter registration. We're hitting all of these great highs, from the Zoom with the Black women and raising the money and the Zoom with the Black, all the things. But the work needs to begin. It is time to get in. And as I tell people all the time, that we can't do this by ourselves. And most people don't want to listen to politicians anyway. It is important that you take your message and you talk to whoever your village is, whether it's your coworkers, whether it's your line sisters, whether it is your family members. It's important for you to tell them why you plan to go vote and the difference that it is going to make in your life and why it can make a difference in their lives. And you be the one to encourage them, because they always feel as if we have an angle. And to be perfectly honest, we do. I mean, depending on who you are. But for me, my angle is that I want better for my country, period, full stop. I tell people all the time, I can't wait to get out of politics and go back to a more quiet living existence, where I can go and hang out and I ain't got to worry about anybody worrying about what I done drank, what I done ate, who I done been out with.
How you might show up on Instagram the next morning, right?
Exactly.
I have a couple of minutes. I'm sorry, I just have a couple of minutes left with you, Congresswoman. I want to ask you about the Veep's stake. So the VP is picking a VP. And we've seen a list of people from senators to governors and others who are clearly qualified. Do you have any sense about who might be the best running mate to run with Kamala Harris to make the Democratic ticket as strong as possible, not just at the top, but then would encourage people to come out for some of those down ballot races, which are equally important because we want to give her a Congress. We don't want to just give her the White House. We want to give her the Congress as well.
Yeah, we want to make sure she's successful, which means a democratically controlled House and Senate. Listen, I trust the vice president wholeheartedly. So I know that she's going to be very thoughtful about this. And I trust whoever she picks. And I know that this is kind of like the big step. This is the big first decision that any presidential candidate or nominee has to make. And to think that Trump chose JD Vance, something tells me whoever she picks is going to be a lot better pick than JD Vance. But ultimately, I think that she is going to look for someone that she can consider a partner, someone that she feels like will work very well with her, because with her and the president, they are in a partnership. And I think that she is going to try to mimic that type of relationship. And so if I had to guess in any way, the person that she probably knows the best is probably our great senator out of Arizona. But I don't know. And obviously, he has a very strong background when it comes to gun rights, obviously married to Gabby Giffords.
Right.
And we all know what all happened with Gabby and the shooting. And so he's been a fierce advocate as relates to gun reform. And we know that the vice president currently leads the very first gun, I forget exactly what they call it, at the White House. So,
Right.
you know, I could see that. She's obviously worked with
Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona that you're talking about.
Sorry.
I'm telling you, I got to wrap up with you, Congresswoman. I got to ask you this last question. Is the excitement around Kamala Harris, has that inspired you to think about running for higher office?
No.
Well, on that note, unequivocally, hell no. Okay, I hear you. Thank you so much. I look forward to running into you on the campaign trail, seeing you at the great convention in Chicago, and seeing you continue to be such a great advocate, not only for our Congress, but for our vice president, hopefully soon to be president. That is our great Congresswoman from the great state of Texas, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. And that was our great Congresswoman from the state of Texas, Jasmine Crockett, who was joining us. She says she has not been inspired by the enthusiasm around Kamala Harris to run for a higher office, such as senator or governor for her state. Well, I think there are some folks, particularly girls and women, who perhaps have been inspired by this enthusiasm around Kamala Harris. They've seen these viral videos. Some call them fan edits or fan cams. And these are videos where influencers are basically putting sound and fast cuts and visual effects together of our vice president, putting her in the same vein that they would put a pop culture icon such as Beyonce or Rihanna or Taylor Swift. And then these videos go viral online, and millions of people are watching them saying, hey, I too can be president or perhaps vice president, and I too can become an internet sensation. Here in this hour to talk about how the vice president will continue to inspire millions online, how her fans and presumably voters are doing that as well, is Andre Brock. He is an associate professor at the Department of Literature, Media, and Communication at Georgia Institute of Technology. And my good friend Marissa Nance is here. She's the CEO and founder of Native Tongue Communications. They both are no strangers to the program, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing both of them and have a great deal of respect for their acumen on the subject of communications and messaging. And we've often heard, Professor Brock, that Democrats are horrible, that we are the worst at delivering messages, that they're too convoluted, they're too lengthy. The New York Times said that Joe Biden was a list and Donald Trump was a vibe. Tell me if you are inspired that Kamala Harris is going to be better on the campaign trail with delivering the message, not only for her campaign, but for the Democratic Party.
Since the turmoil of this weekend, the messaging from the Democrats, at least on social media, has been much crisper, much sharper, much more focused in the idea that they are engaged in a fight for our lives, that this election will resolve one way or another. Just the fact that she's already released basically a concert level video of herself giving the speech and using the keyword freedom has already made waves around my small area of the internet. And people are much more impressed with Democratic messaging since Sunday.
That's really good to hear. And we know it's going to take a lot more than viral videos and slick edits and fan cam videos to win this election. It is going to take not just the vice president herself, but all of Democratic surrogates and Democratic elected officials, Marissa, are going to have to be on point. And we are going to have to deliver a message. Sometimes it's a message that people don't want to hear, like the U.S. policy on Gaza and Israel. There are many young people that hear that message, and it's not one that resonates with them. And they're hoping that the vice president, the presumptive nominee, Kamala Harris, has a different message. So I really want to get your take. Andre, Professor Brock said he's excited, or at least feels like the message has been crisper online. Do you agree with that assessment as well?
I would even go so far as to say it's there. I've been struggling to find a cohesive and coherent kind of moving forward conversation happening. And now I just think I agree. Like that, we've got the conversation. I love that there is a direct juxtaposition between her as a prosecutor and he as a felon. I mean, it's very clear. And I also love the fact that we're dealing in facts. Didn't have to make that up. Didn't have to, play with truth in any way. We are dealing strictly with facts. Prosecutor and felon, and freedom is the word that is tangent between those two things. So I love where they're headed. I think it really will resonate with a lot of people.
Okay, great. Yes, Beyonce gave Kamala Harris the rights, the go ahead. And we know that oftentimes this gets sticky. These pop singers have these famous songs, or these very popular songs, and politicians want to co-opt them, want to put them in their ads. And often they get cease and desist letters from lawyers like me saying, wait a minute, I haven't licensed that song to you. And sometimes we've seen them have to actually take down songs from their ads. We've seen folks like Donald Trump use songs without authority at his rallies, and have had singers have to, again, send those cease and desist letters. So I think we're all in agreement that so far, and we're talking 3 days, people, or maybe 4 days max, the Democratic Party seems to be delivering a clear message, at least online, and some of the commercials, the few commercials that Harris has released so far. But I wonder, where do we go past this honeymoon period? Where do we go when the Republican Party starts to really hit home? They've already started with some of the attacks on her. They're digging up old videos of her. They're digging up videos on policies that she supported when she was running for president herself. And we know that Donald Trump, who seems to be flailing at this point, is only going to turn up the volume, turn up the heat on his personal attacks on her. So Andre and Marissa, you both say, hey, things so far have been great. The juxtaposition of the convict and the prosecutor, messages that people understand, very clear. But let's talk, Professor Brock, about messages on policy, because so far we haven't heard, and again, no critique because it's only been 3 or 4 days, but at some point, Vice President Kamala Harris is going to have to sit down for some interviews on network television. She'll probably do some on cable. And there are going to be serious questions about the Biden-Harris policies and the Harris plus whoever her VP policy looking forward. Talk to us about that. And we know there's some issues that a lot of young voters in particular have about the policy around Gaza. What recommendations do you have, or what do you see? I shouldn't even say recommendations. You don't work for the campaign. But what do you see the best way that the vice president can craft a message on some of these really contentious policies of her administration?
See the vice president is being hamstrung in part because she is in this administration. So a really clear example came through last night when Netanyahu addressed Congress. The Democrats put out a number of announcements saying 100 members of the Democratic caucus aren't going and 27 members of the Democratic Senate aren't going. But what ended up happening is on the live feed of the thing where, they did rightfully focus on Rashida Tlaib, shout out to her, right? But they had seat fillers sitting in those spaces where the Democratic representatives and senators would have been. And so when those folks stood up to give Netanyahu a round of applause, nobody knows who their representatives or senators look like. So it looked like the entire Senate was giving this man a standing ovation.
Hold on a second, Professor Brock. Were those seat fillers put there to make it appear that Democrats weren't boycotting the speech?
Yes. They did it to make it look like there was not necessarily unanimous, but at least that this was a a moment where there was some bipartisan support for Netanyahu coming in, right?
Wow.
And so,
Wait a minute. You're going fast on this. This is a big issue because there are a lot of people that think that Kamala Harris has an opportunity to deviate some from the policies of the Biden-Harris administration and to be more forceful, to be more critical, as you will, of Netanyahu. But this play have seat fillers, have people stand up, make it look like Democrats didn't walk out on the man, doesn't suggest she would do that.
And I think Marissa can speak to this better than me, but immediately after Netanyahu gave his speech, Harris releases a statement on her letterhead talking about the violence of the collegiate pro-Palestine protesters. And so she's putting her foot in a mess that she didn't really have to put her foot in. If she wasn't there, if she was on the campaign trail giving a speech, don't say nothing about what he said, because now you basically reawakening people's dissatisfaction with the Democratic leadership at this point.
It's interesting. Yeah, weigh in on that, Marissa, because again, there are people, and I've had some of them on my show, who said, look, they're looking forward to a Kamala Harris that is more out front about her critique than Biden has been over the policies of Israel. But others are saying, that's a conundrum because she's a part of this administration. So she still is the vice president, and her job as vice president is to support the policies of the president.
You know, as a marketer and someone who's thinking about messaging, this is a fantastic conversation, but I also want to bring in the fact that we have to think about the audience, right? So if we're talking about marketing and advertising, it's really simple. You want to convince someone to buy something, do something, provide you that's marketing and advertising. I want to convince you to do what I want you to do. And when we're thinking about audience and we're thinking about the voters and we're thinking about how clear she needs to be and the connection she needs to make, it's really going to be about truth. It really is. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, which is they've got a wonderful laser focus. She's a prosecutor.
But wait a second, Marissa. I want to stick with this. What happened last night and Professor Brock's critique that the vice president stepped into a mess that she didn't have to. And what's your opinion about that?
But and what I'm getting to is if your currency isn't in truth and facts, then it's going to be obvious and clear with this audience. So voters, to your point, Reva, and your point, Professor, are going to say, I know the truth. I know the facts. That's the currency I want to deal with. We know younger voters, especially millennials, they are very focused on feeling seen and feeling heard. And the best way you can make someone feel seen and heard is to make them feel like and understand you're speaking to them in truth, in reality, and in facts. So if we're already saying, and I am not as familiar with the situation last night as Professor Brock was, I was on a plane. So I want to do some research because this sounds incredible that this would happen and who allowed it to happen. But assuming the facts within that, it's a matter of, look, you've got to speak to people in a way that they feel seen, they feel heard. And to do that, you have to give them the truth. You have to give them the facts. If she's deviating from that, there's got to be some course correction quickly.
But I'm a little confused, Marissa. You just gave a really brilliant answer. It went over my head. Let's back it up. Are you suggesting that it would have been ill-advised to issue this statement, given if these people were, in fact, seat warmers and not the actual elected officials themselves? Is that what you're saying? I'm a little confused.
I'm not saying it's ill-advised or advised to send out the statement. What I'm saying is, did she understand wholly what was going on within the chamber? Was she privy to that? Was her team privy to that, so that she had a full story and her statement could be conducive to all the things that were happening around her and not just strictly within, this is what I know and this is what I want to say, I'm going to release it? Because even though that's her truth and that's what she wants to release, external forces may impact how she says it and the way she communicates it. So if her team didn't know that happened, they might not have released the statement as they did. And again, I didn't know it happened myself. I was on a plane, so I'm really curious to learn more about it.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's assume that she did know it. And I want to get to the point that she released the statement, and correct us if we're wrong, Professor Brock, because I haven't seen the statement either. The statement is pretty forceful against Netanyahu. Would that be accurate?
Against?
Against.
Not really.
Okay, so tell us more about the statement. We need to
understand. Came in and basically was arguing that we should lock up or at least punish these pro-Palestine protesters. And the statement doesn't distance itself from that, because Biden has already made previous remarks about how he views these protests as being problematic and a threat to American law and order, right? And the statement doesn't distance her from that. And I think Marissa is actually really on point here by saying there are external forces. She's still the vice president. She's not the president until November. So she's not going to be able to distance herself from Biden's policies as much as we would want her to, at least not until the convention, when she's been confirmed as the Democratic nominee. Right now she has, it's been reported that she has the votes, but until those votes are in, the delegates are in, she's not the official nominee. So at this point, she has to play a really delicate game. And it's unfortunate. But
one of the things we do know, and my producer, I'm asking him to try to find her statement that was released. It was reported in the mainstream press, Washington Post, New York Times yesterday, that Netanyahu called the pro-Palestinian protesters idiots and said they were being funded by Iran. And I didn't see a statement come from the White House, rebuking that statement, saying, no, protesters in this country aren't idiots. Was that a missed opportunity?
I do want to jump in. I saw one release, if it's what you're talking about, because I didn't know about what was going on in the chamber, but I saw the end of a release quickly on the flight where the vice president talked about the fact that there were protests and some of them violent and some of them burned flags. I saw that. It could have been a different one. And her point was, and so I'm going to shift a little bit, because I think she did a good job of saying, listen, I don't condone that ever. Violence is never right. I absolutely support freedom of speech and your right to have your opinion, but when it begins to transverse into violence, then that has no place here in this country. That's not who we are. I believe in the freedoms. I think she even played into it. I believe in the freedoms that we're given, but I think there should be a limitation when it crosses into. I don't know if I've got that right, but that's the one you were referencing. But I did see the tail end of that, slightly different than a direct response to his speech, which is what I thought you were talking about. That press release a little different.
Right. And so she had a separate meeting one-on-one with him after his televised talk. And I think what we're seeing now is the reports of her meeting with him after. But I'm not clear on the timing of when her statement was released. And I think it's interesting that the administration is saying the protests turned violent, as if it wasn't the instigation of university presidents and their law enforcement in the locality who started being aggressive towards the protesters. Right. And so
I don't know.
And
if
hold on, referencing... that's going to be what you raised, Professor Brock, is what a lot of young voters in particular are going to be looking for, is to see how far is the vice president willing to go in having these conversations, particularly around protesters and what we saw with our very eyes and the way that these protesters were handled by these university presidents and by police. And back to your point of, she does still work for this president. And before both of you weigh in on this, I just want to tell you about some breaking news I just got. So we've been hearing about all these calls, 44,000 Black women on a call on Monday night, 30,000 plus Black men on Monday. I think the Black women were Sunday, the men were Monday. There have been calls with Asian American women. There have been calls with Black gay men. Well, white women, so far, they hold the record. I just got notification that there were over 137,000 white women on a call in support of Kamala Harris. So talk about enthusiasm. I mean, the enthusiasm is just, off the chain for this candidate in ways we haven't seen probably since 2007, 2008, Barack Obama. Just wanted everyone to know, we've been asking, where are the white women? Well, they were on a call, 137,000 of them. But back to the statement.
Can I piggyback that with one thought, Reva? Do you mind?
Go
I
ahead.
just
Go
want to,
ahead.
just for the viewers, because I feel like it's kind of we've got to give them this this public service announcement, and that is what we have seen up until now is a really disproportionate amount of advertising, spending, and messaging by the Democrats and President Biden, while the felon is barely spending anything. What he's got to spend, he's got to spend on his legal fees, and that's just, again, we deal in truth. That is the truth of the matter. I mean, at one point, maybe 30 days ago, they were spending 3 times what he had spent. I'm really interested to begin to see if there's going to be an increase. Gotta be, because what we see is, I think he was in a place of feeling like, I've got this, I don't need to spend the money. Everyone knows, everyone's going to vote for me, knows who I am. They've got my message. I don't have any issues. I think he's going to start to get scared. And I think you're going to see an increase in spending and an increase in messaging. And with that, we said we want to deal in truth and facts in this conversation. What we're hesitant to believe is that that will happen then. And so already there's I've seen 2 deep fakes already that are AI fakes. So I just want everyone listening. There was going to be a big Beyonce Taylor Swift concert that is, let me tell everyone, as much as all of us would like it, and maybe if we talk about it, it will become reality. It is not reality, but because, as you started this conversation, Reva, Shia said, use my song. I'm happy for you to do that. And I think that began to just pick up steam and became something else. So I just want to caution everyone as a public service announcement that I think we're going to hear a lot more messaging, because I think there's going to be a lot more spending. And please fact check, fact check, fact check. We want to make sure that what you're hearing and what you're seeing is real and right and the truth.
Well, I want to go back to something you said, and we'll get back to the vice president's statement. But Marissa, you said that the messaging needs to be grounded in facts. Professor Brock, that's not how the Republicans message to their base. Donald Trump is the antithesis of the truth. He, in fact, just grounds all of his messaging pretty much in lies that are fact checkable.
The deep fakes
they're not just deep fakes, they are outright lies, but yet
Absolutely.
Those messages resonate, Professor Brock, with his base. They're not demanding the truth from him. If anything, they just, the more exaggerated the claim is, the more they seem to relate to it.
So when Fox News was founded by Roger Ailes, one of the things that was their primary motive was to feed red meat to the base. The base didn't exist in that fashion at that time, but they've crafted a base. And so they are the ultimate expression between them and Murdoch, the ultimate expression of tabloid journalism, right? Where if it bleeds, it leads. And what they've done in conjunction with the conservative talk show hosts who had syndicated radio shows also for the last 40 years, they've fostered this attitude of fear, of rage, and of victimization. And I'm teaching this book this fall. It's called Verified by my friend Mike Caulfield. And he says, one of the things that people really underestimate is how emotions take them to a particular place where it shuts down their critical faculties. And we can see that with the Republicans, right? They don't necessarily need facts anymore because all they're going on is vibes, right? And so that becomes really difficult to fact check when your opponent is not using facts. So one of the things I've been seeing the last day or so is that Kamala locked up hundreds and thousands of Black men on marijuana charges when she was district attorney, which apparently turns out not to be true. She started a diversion program, which let most of those men escape those low-level offenses and ended up, being able to rehabilitate themselves. But one of the things you can always convince Republicans of, and certain Democrats, is that Black people are always going to be soft on crime because they're criminals. Right. Or criminal adjacent. Right. And so I get nervous when Democrats and strategists, and this is not about you, Marissa, but when they start saying, pay attention to the facts, check the facts. And I'm like, being factual with the racist means you're playing the racist game, because they don't.
What we know is someone like Trump, he lies so quickly, so rapidly. Right. There's not the mechanism in place to fact check him. One expert said he told 600 lies during that debate. And what came out of the debate was the critique of Joe Biden being disastrous and very little critique of the lies that Donald Trump told. And that's a whole technique that some folks use.
And I love the fear that you base. And I think what I might say then is, as you form your own opinions in this PSA, make sure you're basing them on what you know to be fact, right? So if you can't fact check someone else, you can certainly fact check yourself. And that's where your opinions should come from. They should be based there.
Yeah, it's a little scary out here because a lot of folks don't know what's true and what's fake. They see the headlines, the sensationalized headlines, and they latch on to that. And then they start spreading it, sending those fake headlines to their friends, to their family. And that's how these things go viral. Obviously, a lot to talk about. Thank you so much, Professor Brock. Always a pleasure to have you back. I learned so much when you are with us. Thank you, Marissa, for the great work you are doing. I know you're going to continue to help our candidates, these candidates who are trying to save democracy, do so in a way with a message that resonates.